Welcome back once again. So we're here with our dinosaur taking this, jump turn over to his side here as he makes a run for it and a bid for escape. There's a fair bit we need to do to really tease out this motion and make all of the necessary corrections so that it plays nicely, and so we'll get on with that at this point. So I think the first issue to contend with in this whole thing, in getting it smoothed out and sort of polished off a bit, is going to be the timing. If we watch it in playback, then it sort of has a bit of a go slow going on there. Doesn't really give that sense of haste or the fact that he's trying to accelerate and pick up speed and move faster. Now, the first part of his leap, I think, is pretty good, because of course he's coming from a standstill. The speed there looks decent, I think. But it's certainly this last part there is exceedingly slow. And of course, across here, it's too slow. So let's see exactly where I'm going to want to tighten these keys. That's good. I think it's good pretty much up until here. I think that that's pretty decent. I might pull that back one frame just to see. So we have, of course, still got part of the slide pivot turn taking place there. So let's just give that a look just to see how... Actually, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tidy up the second part, because actually that's definitely the worst. So starting there at frame 599, the only things that I've got keyed to move from there on is the main root and this foot control here, this leg control. So it's considerably slow, so I'm going to bring it down, let's say 2 frames, and then I'll grab this one here and bring that down 2 frames also. And let's just see how that plays. I think that should be a bit quicker. Yeah, that's better. Starting to pick up the pace. Let's take this second one, move it yet another frame down, take them both again and yet another frame in. Yep, that's starting to work well, possibly even slightly swifter. Yep, looks good, and we'll do the same here. Yep, definitely you can really see the fact that he's now starting to accelerate away there. That last one is now too fast, so let's push that out one. Actually, maybe need to push them both out one, just there. Yeah, that's definitely more like it. So that's a good speed, I do believe. Consequently, I think I need to bring this little spacing across here up some as well. That's a little trickier because we've got the 2 frame piece there before the second slide pivot starts turning. So what I'll do is I'll keep that 2 space just for the moment, grab all of these later frames. Again, now we're grabbing the slide pivot as well, and we're pulling that 599 and after backwards 1. So that speeds that up there. Let's have a little look how that behaves. Aha, okay, that looks pretty good. That's starting to slink and look quite natural as an overall speed. And yes, keeping that 2 frame is definitely about correct. Of course, if I need to make any subtle speed adjustments across that 2 frame, the easiest way to do it is just going to be to move the root back and forth in space over the turn. If we look at it in perspective view here, I think we are working out a little better. Although we may need to come even one more down. Let's try it. Let's push it really quick, see how that looks. Take that one, and we'll shrink these guys back to 3 spaces as well. I do believe that's better. That's really creating a sense of real spring and acceleration, much more urgency there. So actually, yes, even that tighter timing is good here, I believe. As you can see, of course, it is quite tricky to work out in a move like this if you're getting exactly the right sort of timing and spacing. And what I think is going to help me to diagnose it, even though I think I'm looking pretty good at this point, what will help me more is if I start to actually move into the run cycle. If I can get the speed and the timing for that figured out, then I can see how I've transitioned into that run, and that will help me as well. So before I go to clean any of this, mess that we've got here up, and of course do any of the tweening back when he's taking his back step as well, I'm going to move into the run cycle. So we're really getting a whole, area of action blocked and timed so as we can sort of see it as a whole, rather than, trying to work these individual sections here before carrying on to the next one. So let's say this foot, this trailing foot here now will have held until, let's just say 600 for say's sake. Let's grab you and we'll bring this foot across like this. So this foot is really in flight. We're also going to see his body angled down by this point here. So there, let's have that in flight there. Okay, so we can see that that's a good pose for a run cycle to be in. So let's work to the next, which will be the contact now for this foot. So let's go 1, 2, 3. You remember, of course, with the dog, you get this flight time where, you know, the legs are off the ground, and we'll have the same here. Obviously, you get the same with the biped, the legs come off the ground, and so we'll sort of trace a rough path like that, and let's predict that the contact should be about here-ish. Of course, we want it in line under the body here. Then we'll see his root at this point should have come somewhere like this, so that's approximately where we want it at the contact, and there we go, we see we're getting the leap there. This trailing foot, we'll hold it back there at the 1, 2, 3 when we make contact. We'll bring this in and bring it up, so it will have trailed back, we'll have turn on the toe and whatnot, that'll still be in trailing. We'll go a further 1, 2, 3 where this would have a hold. The root will have come forward to now make that the trailing leg like this, and this foot will be up here in flight, whilst this foot here will be up. Let's get it positioned correctly, there we go, and in flight, getting ready for its next contact. So there we go, that's the start of our run. We can possibly push him even further along, I'm thinking. We'll see in a moment. Let's just take this out to the next contact, which we'll guesstimate to be around here somewhere. The root obviously having come forward to that contact around here. So we'll come ahead 1, 2, 3 to what we reckon will be the next contact point, somewhere probably around here for this foot. We'll have brought the root out, so of course it's making that contact there. This leg will have come up to its back trail, somewhere around there-ish, what have you. And there we see the beginnings of our run cycle looking like this. So let's see what that's like timing and spacing wise. Well, the timing actually isn't bad. This sort of 6-frame rollover on the feet, it's very fast, but it's not awful. However, he's definitely not moving forward fast enough. His feet are going like the clappers, whilst his body isn't really moving that far forward or that fast. So let's change some of this timing. I think that the feet are going a little too quickly here. Their turnover rate is just a little too speedy. So what I'm going to do, so that's where we really break into the run cycle, is there from 600. So I'm going to make these, instead of 3s, we shall make them all 4s, like this. So that sort of spaces that out in time a little bit. Let's see how that works for us. Yeah, that's a bit better. Certainly more realistic, I believe. However, what we can do on account of that is actually allow them to move forwards more, because that's sort of a very short movement there. What I'm also going to look at is the Z channel here, just on the root, to make sure that we are getting or building a reasonably constant forward speed, which we can see I'm sort of not doing. He's speeding up, slowing down quite a bit there. Of course, looking from the start here at frame 600. So we'll grab the root and the 2 leg IKs there, and we'll get all of the Z positions for them. That gives us all 3 there. Let's look just at the section that we're interested in here, which is of course 600 onwards, and we'll see that these are going in slight opposition. So let's see, there's our 604, which is okay. I think that's a good distance, so that wants to come forward. So let's bring 608 further out, possibly further out still. We can watch, of course, what's happening there in the graph. I think that's more like it. Okay, on to the next. Bring that right out there. Again, let's look at the, I'm looking at the root primarily here. See how that's looking. And in fact, what I'm going to do is just look at the root movement there. So, okay, so there's that. I think that's reasonably good. 612. Yeah, a little bit further still. We can begin perhaps to slightly start accelerating him as well. And of course, this last one, that'll be coming right out here. And we see that we're getting some slippage on the feet there. That's okay, we'll tidy that up. But how's the rate of motion, the rate of play? I think that is pretty good. Since he is starting into his run, what I am going to do is work up that acceleration. So starting here into 604, let's have him back just a little bit like this. 608, back a scotch more. That will obviously want to come back a little bit, and there we go. We get this slight acceleration curve building in by 618 there, or 616 I should say. Looks a little weird with the feet sliding around. Let's see it from the top view. This will give us a good idea. And I do believe I like that. The timing of the feet crossed with the thing is a bit terrible, but the rate at which he's moving, picking up his acceleration, I like an awful lot. I'm quite pleased with. So what we will do is focus on the root, and let's look at its movement here. Right, we see this key there. We can bring that just down a little touch there. Do just a tiny little touch with that one before it. So that should be leading us back into the turn point of the acceleration there. So that's sort of easing that a little bit. We see also that part of that acceleration is coming on the X channel of the root there, which is of course slightly decelerating as he's moving along. So let's just check that. Obviously as we turn him, his X channel will change. We see that really this represents a bit of forward acceleration on the X there, so I'm going to tease that frame up ever so slightly. Possibly this one in fact. Aha, there we're seeing something that's starting to now look smoother. So let's tease that up a little more. Let's tease this one up a little more. And then these guys really are starting to produce a decelerating effect across the X translation there as he turns. Okay, good. So I'm reasonably happy with the pace of what we've got going on now. It's time to add in all of the detail and subtlety to these, controls now, so it actually has some naturalness to the body motion now that we've worked out the, the sort of timing and flow of the actual main root item itself. So we've got him moving through space at a decent sort of rate that we want him to be. Actually, something that I can do that's going to prove very useful here is to do what we did with our Hulk example, and that's just to lose the legs because they're sort of getting in the way visually for me. So now I can just watch the body alone and thus view its rate of motion like this. It helps me get a much cleaner idea of what's going on. If I watch it from top view here, which is probably the most useful for this move, it does seem that it's sort of a little bit, square, if you take my meaning. It corners a bit harshly. And one thing that I'm going to do here, because of course it is playing quite quickly, it is a fast action, it can be hard to just note the sort of exact point in time where I'm going wrong. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use the preview, make preview, and the reason why is because of course when you've got a preview up you can change the playback speed, so I'm going to set that to 1/2 speed, and that really lets me get a view of how things are moving, where he's accelerating, where he's decelerating. And we see really that as he comes across this line, he takes that last turn is very swift, perhaps a little too swift. It's much quicker than his previous rotation. And remember, he's sort of, even though he's using his legs to move himself around on the ground, what he's really doing is throwing his body around. And so that should really have sort of a constant-ish rate of turn. Obviously the rate of turn will accelerate from the initial point when he starts spinning, but you should get this nice smooth rate of turn taking place, which I can see very clearly here I'm not getting. That last little turn he does, so that last slide of the second slide pivot, that's just a bit too fast. And I think his initial takeoff, you'll see that when he starts running away, he just breaks into that initial acceleration a bit too quickly. So let's see what we can do to fix this up. First of all, of course, we've got this 2-frame difference between the one slide pivot stopping its rotation and the next one beginning its rotation. So what I'm actually going to do here Of course, we were playing that to the legs, but now the legs are out of the picture, we can sort of focus on this a bit more. And so irrespective of what this does to the legs, I'm going to do it just like in the Hulk, and we'll take care of the legs underneath him afterwards. So rather than have this slide pivot stop its rotation at that point, I'm going to push it on one frame, and I'm going to take the other and start it rotating one frame earlier. So now one rotation starts at the same point in time the other stops, so they overlap one another perfectly like that. Okay, that immediately gives a slightly more constant rate of motion, or should I say a constant rate of rotation. Now whatever we keyed on the root across that in-between time now is, incorrect. And we see of course that we've got this root key one before the changeover of the two pivots, so that's giving us a little jump there. So if we move that frame over to 593 so it falls in line, we see that immediately we've got a much smoother turn taking place there now on the body. If we give it just a little nudge to the side there, then we see that our turn and rotate is looking a good deal smoother now. Okay, so that's really good. We like that. So we're going to see how long he takes to rotate, and up to there he's okay. It's really that last rotation there that's too fast. So that's good, but then 1, 2, 3, that's too snappy. So what I'm going to do is take all of these frames, drag them out, let's say 1, and let's see how we are looking there. That's a bit better. Still quite fast in that last piece of the rotation, but I think it is giving me a much cleaner sense of turn. We can try to drag it out by one more here, see how that appears, and that's smoother. That's certainly closer to the actual rate. I just need to think whether I want him to speed up on that last turn or not. And I think not really, because of course if he were, pushing himself and turning and turning and turning, then his rate of rotation might well be accelerating. But of course here he's coming to the completion of his turns. He wants to stop himself rotating. So it shouldn't be so fast at the out point there. So I think that that works pretty well. I think taking it any slower is going to look wrong. We can just, of course, give it a look and see if that appears any better. It doesn't. See, he slows down his rotation at the end there too much. So let's put it back where we had it. Say, there we go. Okay, now he's coming in too tight here. The actual, the amount by which the body is turning is correct, but the turning circle is wrong. That's where that's looking weird. So of course that's going to be the x-axis here on his root item. So let's just grab the old graph editor. Here's the x. Can find the point in question, which is here. Let's push that further up there. Is it just that one, or will we want to move the other frames? Let's have a look. Quick scrub here says to me, yes, definitely the other ones need to come up as well. So I'll just send that back to where it was, and then I can grab all of these and drag it up like this. Let's watch, see how that's playing. I think that's largely reasonable. I think the side movement is okay, but what I need to do is push him a little further on his Z. So let's grab the Z axis. Let's take all of those frames and bring those up a bit at that point as well. Maybe not that much. You can see the pains of cross-axis animation that you get sometimes trying to make a nice arc run across two axes. But there we go. Bit of X and Z adjustment, and I think that looks a lot better. My only issue now is how fast he starts running almost immediately. I've got next to no change in X going on by this point. He's coming pretty much level, so all I need to do is just start tweaking down his Z position so as his initial break of acceleration into the run isn't quite so fierce. We'll just give him a moment there to begin speeding up. And there we go. I think we are now getting a much better sort of speed coming in here. Let's just use the old preview again. So there he is at normal speed. That looks reasonably good. Let's see it at 1/2 speed. And I definitely think that that's starting to look considerably better now. Okay, so with that done, we can bring his legs back and, of course, start to now clean up those foot positions, which, of course, coming from our previous keying, are wrong. And what I think will also help in making sure that we get the foot action right here is if we start to work some of the up down on the hip as well, because that'll help us get the full momentum of his body that we really need to fully match his legs. So I'm going to say that actually the full up position will be there. He won't have thrusted up quite as much by this point. We'll also rotate him down a bit there, so he's pushing up, and like this. That should be the contact point for the foot there, so I'm going to move this root keyframe to that point as well. Okay, we have the contact taking place there, so we can start leveling him off a bit, start counter turning him a bit there on bank and bring him down just a little bit before it. And we can probably move those two frames there for the leg goal back, so he contacts just an instant sooner, or contacts at the exact same moment of the action on that slide pivot beginning there. So again, that time's up. And then we've got 4 frames till the next point, so at the in-between there, bring him down. So we're starting to get this. What I'm going to do is create a key for his root here 1 frame after, get rid of the one before, so as I can get an action just a frame later, at which I will have pivoted him down like this. So there we get the leap, press, coming back up for another leap. And then of course we can start adjusting the positions on these feet. So that's not bad, maybe a little bit further over there, just a touch. Let's create a key for that at 600 as well, in that same position. So there's the arrival on that foot. So his root should really have a keyframe there. Perhaps lose that one. I'll keep him tilted again here. 1, 2, he's pitched down and he's pushed down, and then into the next here. That foot there is still dragging, so let's hold that just at 608 for the minute. Then we see if this is the drop down for the root, then the next one will be a push up and also a rotation up there. And let's just see initially how that begins to appear. Aha, there we go. Okay, we're really getting that little sense of bouncing. He really is moving himself. Obviously that's just coming off the root item there. Looks a bit silly and cartoony, but once we work in the spine, neck, tail, that should start to look considerably better. And we can see of course that we have made quite a marked improvement already. And again, looking from the top view there, that's looking much nicer as well. Okay, so let's continue that whole process. After a bit more of a fast forward then, we see that we've got the leg actions here all keyed in and underway. Again, nothing particularly mega interesting or what have you to see here. We're just working on very similar stuff to that which we did during the walk cycle. We are of course picking the main foot goal up off the ground as it comes along. We're tipping the toe item, we're moving the knee, and we're using the toe roller just to create the specific little foot action. And of course lining the feet up beneath and with the body and so on as well, making sure that their contact points match up with the movement of the body. So we fast forwarded past it because it is really just a process of key, repeat. But let me point out a lot of the nuances that we've got going on in here that are actually important to the motion. First of all, let's look at his takeoff. So you'll notice he's got his feet nice and tight together, ready to really leap for it and break out. See, we've got this little lift there as he comes back onto that readying foot. And I just realised that my knee's a little out of place there, so let me just correct that, of course. Okay, notice of course that as we're now doing this lift off and his whole body leans to the side there, we are tipping the foot goals. Of course, if you had individual toes, you'd be working the press of those, not twisting at the hip, but of course just banking and rolling the toes of the foot over the ground. And you see as he comes up, this one starts to turn as it drags away. We'll notice that because this rear side foot, this right side foot here, is the main press one, notice that we set it up nicely with the knee position there, giving a little bit of spring into his ankle as he settles, so as he's ready to really hoof and heave off of that leg. there to really start propelling himself, whilst the left leg here is unable to really provide the same push because it needs to be brought out in time to make contact as he, his body gets lurched across. However, notice one little nuance that we've got keyed in here, and you'll see it's the little double bounce that occurs. You see how the ankle lowers like that and then starts to press up. This gives this little double bounce into the leg, which gives the feeling of him actually, pressing with the leg, not so much to lift the body, but to lift the leg itself. He's using the spring action of his leg against the ground to help spring it off the ground and move it quickly, rather than just straight lifting it up like a weight. The important point to notice is that we maintain roughly the knee height as his ankle comes down there. You see, the knee height relative to his body is maintained. That's where the ankle dips. And then, of course, as the foot begins to spring, the ankle pushes out, and that causes the knee to flick up. So he's essentially using the spring action, which would, of course, be the tendons in his ankle joint here, to provide the spring to get his foot off the ground. And, of course, notice how we trail the toe there to give a little sense of that action happening as well. So we can see that when he does that, you get the real sense of this leg doing a little spring to be pulled off the ground there. It's not just being dragged up, and that gives a much nicer impression to the fact that he is, of course, doing this bolt and jump and going that way. So there we go, and of course as he comes round we just line the feet up nicely and start to break him into the run action, and we start using some of the run action posing. And just to demonstrate that, that's easier to show specifically once we get into the main cycle here. So we've got, of course, the contact point where his foot, begins to make contact. It's just the tip of the toe, and that, of course, comes down like that. Notice that at the contact point, you have the trailing leg here, and the good position for that is around about where it is. Notice how the ankle is right beneath where his butt would be, and see that the metatarsal part, the foot part below the ankle here, is pretty much at 90 degrees down to the body. See that again. We come to the next contact, which is here, and once again we've got the leg there bent. It's pretty much two 90-degree bends there, but the metatarsal set is running 90 degrees to the body there. A little bit further back on this one because he started to speed up there. That, of course, was his first landing. That's main run cycle now here. Notice that before we make contact, this leading leg is really reaching out in anticipation. It's reaching to grab hold of the ground there, ready to catch him, coming right out in front like this. With this passing leg, you note how we also tip the toe back, and of course as he comes across here, where his hip drops down as he takes the impact, notice how we keep the knee very high, giving that toe dip along there. Let's see it from the other side here. There we go, it's now on the right leg. See how he pulls that right up and throws it forwards like that, keeping his toes out, ready to make contact. They roll under and pull over. And so we get this real leap and catch action going on like this. If we just look at it, the simple keys on the root item itself, we have contact, drop, leap, contact, drop, leap, contact, drop. Nice simple little tick-tock into the run cycle there. And of course notice that we're pitching slightly the body up and down, and also notice what I've worked in here. Let me just zoom out a small amount, is that the bounce that his body does, most especially on pitch, is more pronounced here, where he's just working up into the run cycle, building his speed, pushing his legs and getting himself going. And as we move further into the run cycle there, that becomes less pronounced because of course he's building speed, he's got momentum, and so his body is able to be more stable. He's not needing to throw his body weight as much to help propel himself forwards. Consequently, when we see all that going, it looks pretty nice, and we see that we've got that good turn He's turning himself around pretty much quick as he can and then bolting off and making speed and beginning to leap as he runs away fast as he can, like this. And again, we can see it from top view. It gives a nice impression of his turn and run like this. So whilst that takes care of the leg action there, you know, we've gotten the route itself just moving smoothly, and we've caught the legs up along with it. What we don't have at present is any action on the main body itself, the spine, head, neck, tail. That's all dead. It's been dead for, you know, many frames back before here. So at the minute, even though, you know, the run action starts to look good at this point, it still also has a bit of a woodenness to it, especially in the turn there, since the entirety of his spinal column is basically unmoving. So let's have a go at keying all of that. It should be pretty simple, and we'll start out by just sticking in a little hold key. This is 1, 2 before he begins to move there. So a little hold key on the spine. See him come to the extreme down, or just getting into the down hold there. We'll pitch him right down like this, and just there where his foot is up, we'll raise him up slightly on his spine. This gives us a bit of a overlap there, that lets us get the idea of him coming down. We'll really crunch him by this point, coming down, really, you know, burning that crunch in, and then we'll hold him till here. This is just as he's about to spring for the leap now. So we'll hold it there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's really getting in flight. Push him up. Okay, now what we want to do is look at the top angle as well, because what we also want to do is create action on the side to side here. So as he goes down like this, that is coming from this point to the down there. We'll push him sideways that way. Of course, this is anticipation, because he's going to throw himself back in the other direction rather soon. Give him a little twist. Let me just get rid of those extra heading keys that I'd created there when I was doing my pitch action. We'll hold that heading and bank here. So he's really, you see, we get a little bit of trail on him there. I am actually, of course, just moving him over slightly more on his heading and bank there, only a little. Then I'm not going to put a key here. I'll put the next heading bank key over here, at which point we'll be swinging him like this, really into his direction of travel, where he's wanting his body and route to go. And of course we're tipping him like that, so he's really throwing himself into it, really using that body as a weight pull with, and we see it gives us an overlap there. What we'll do, of course, we are getting an overlap, but what we want to do is really accelerate the movement of that body. So what I'll do is I'll come out to frame 3 here, and I'll just create a key there. So of course that holds whatever the pitch is at that point, and I'll delete that previous one. And so at the 3rd frame, I will have begun to swing him quite violently like that. We really get this hoof as he comes across and around. We'll simply hold that heading, give it maybe just an additional bit of bank as he comes to here. This is what, 6 frames later, just coming through the passing position there. That's been the up, so this point he should be down, coming up, and of course he contacts, and bang, 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 goes down, of course, so we're working into that, and of course that's overlapped ever so slightly from the down point of the root, which is here. That's the absolute down, and the pitch down of the spine is occurring 2 frames after that. So again, a little overlap. Now let's watch, because pretty soon he's coming into the end of his turn for direction, which is here. We can of course check to see at what point we brought the root to 0 on heading, which was here. So that's the completion of his turn. So I'm also going to bring 1, 2 frames later the heading of the spine there to 0. And then in this in-between section, I really just want to work on pointing the spine heading to point towards the direction that he's going. So we're starting to unfurl on heading a little at this point and coming completely out at that point. I'll keep the bank at this point, although I shall reduce it slightly. And then by here, I'll have reduced the bank and in fact have gone ever so slightly the other way. Perhaps I've even overshot on heading a bit, of course, as he corrects from that move. See, his spine overshoots, and then what I'm going to do is find the contact pose here, and that's the point at which I'm going to bring his heading right back to zero and also his bank back to zero. Sorry, I said the contact, that should actually be one frame later. Let me just nudge that over. Let's just have a look at what we're getting in top view here. There, you see how his body really rolls around now. That little slink action that we're getting on the spine there is really helping us out a lot. Now he does appear to flick up perhaps a bit hard there when he comes up on pitch, but don't worry about that, because part of that of course is the fact that the neck is still solid, and we'll have another overlap and compensation for that. So let's just stick with it for now. We can of course correct the pitch action on the spine here should we need to. But in the meanwhile, let's just continue to work on it. Let's find where I last did the pitch. It was there. That was the down for the pitch. So there we've got a down coming in on the root. Actually going to pitch his spine up a little here. Bring it down. And then here, this is coming into the contact. I'm going to have it up. I'm going to go 3 over the contact. Bring it down. And now it's getting much more subtle. We don't need much movement here. Right into flight. This is 1 before the contact. Bring it up. 3 later. Contact occurs 1 after. 1, 2, 3 after that. Let it sink down. 1 before contact. Have it up. And so on, basically. So let's see how that looks from this angle. That should give us some overlap on the spine. And it does. And it is reasonably good. Now, of course, we counter-rolled him on bank there. I'm going to also counter-roll him on bank a little here, just to, ease him back into being at 0 bank. But what I'm also going to do is work the heading somewhat as he's flying along now. So make sure that any flat heading frames here are just gotten rid of. And there we have him reaching forward. Let's see, where was the last heading? Came to 0 here. So what have we got? We've got this right foot leading in front, so I'll push him in slightly the opposite direction to that leading foot, to the next contact point, back in the slightly opposite direction, next leading foot, oppose it again like this. So that will just give a bit of a wiggle down his spine as he is running along, and of course we'll have a counter wiggle on the neck, so his body will even out overall. So let's take a look. There we are, it's very fast, quite subtle, but we can notice it there, and we've got a bit more life going on in the actual torso and spine now that he's bounding along, and that's helping us out a good deal. In getting to work on the head and neck then, we find ourselves in a little bit of a tight-ish situation. And it's not because, there's anything particularly difficult to do here. It's simply that the actions that we've keyed up so far have sort of started to paint us into a bit of a corner. That is to say that we've already got, the main body and the spine and everything else doing something very particular. The head and neck really have to play into and go along with all of those sorts of moves at this point. If we have too much deviation, then the character's body overall will be somewhat disjointed in motion terms and consequently is going to look wrong, and it'll make it very difficult to make it look right. So rather than just sort of pushing the head and neck where we think it might look cool, or we might say, oh, I want it to do this, I want to overlap there, what you've really got to do by this point is start taking your cues from what has already been keyed in. Of course, if you were keying this in some sort of pose-to-pose manner, which wouldn't be, wrong at all for this character in this situation, you would have keyed up, hip and legs and body and head and so forth in one. We haven't. We've done it in a layered piece-by-piece approach here. But either way, you would generally find yourself working towards the same sort of end result. Also, of course, what we've done an awful lot with the head and neck, and what we just did on the spine there, was to, include a bit of overlap into our action. However, this is one of those specific actions where the character's really, forcing himself down a certain trajectory. He's not just bobbing along. And so we're not going to want much overlap, particularly in this whole turn set, between the head and neck action and the action going on the spine or the body. Reason being, it's a very directed action. Just like if you have a character throwing a punch, you don't overlap the action of the shoulder and the action of the elbow. You keep them synchronized, as the aim is to push the hand through space in its own line. And the same thing is going on here with the entire spinal column into the head. So we'll start out, we've got a little hold key here at 566, where we're going to begin keying this whole set of action. So we start out with just a little bit of overlap from the spine there, just this 2-frame overlap, because he's just moving gently at that point, so he can sort of lead with his head a little bit. And we see that he's going to be coming to this down pose here. We see the extreme for that is here at 582. So I'm just going to lay in a key for the head and neck at that point, so as I remember where. We see that he gets a little raise up on the body there, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Give him a little raise in the neck, a little bit of a dip in the head, but of course keep him looking up, because his attention is of course focused there on big Dino. Then we'll keep that held until here, 573, which is when his spine starts to slink off. And of course we come to this down, and remember he's got himself over to the side, ready to flick back the other way. So what I'm going to do is just put a little counter turn on the neck here, give it a little counter twist on bank also, and then of course the same on the head there, keeping the head level. But I'm going to keep that pitched up so his attention is still focused there. So you see we get this little up, see, down like this. Nice gentle little wave motion there going through. And we can actually begin to accelerate the head and neck ahead of the spine here. So I can push the neck down a little there and keep the head tipped up. Just put a little turn into the head there. And here, got my head not quite forwards enough, so I really want it to be there. There we are, he's really keeping the eye on big Dino. So there's our little movement. See it from the top there, slinks over gently. Then of course he starts to break quite quickly to his side there. So what we are going to do is we're just going to underlap the head and neck for 1, 2 frames like this. Keep the neck slinked over, head just turned so it's counter twisted like that. So he's just holding his attention there for those couple of frames as his body starts to move. It's also of course notice the spine hasn't fully started rotating yet either, that's still pushing over, so we're sort of sinking the head and neck into the spine here. Then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and at this point we're going to have brought the head and neck right around like this. And what we're trying to do is more or less get his head and neck to now pay attention to where he's going. He's basically looking ahead of himself. So you see, he does this little weave and whip, which is nice and soft there. We also, of course, want to pay attention to, how he's bringing his head across in terms of height. And what we'll actually do at this frame is we'll keep the head and neck ever so slightly down like this, so he's sort of carrying it under. See, it's starting to come up there, so it's doing this under whip. There it is, rolling under his body like this. We'll go another 4 frames, which brings us to basically the high passover of his root item there. We'll keep the neck coming round here on heading, again looking at where he's going to be going. We can check that in just by running forwards into his path, you see. We'll keep the neck dipped down here, so it's sort of bobbing under the movement of the body. Keep the head looking round there, where he's planning on going. And we'll come another 4, which is, him having now contacted, like this. We'll start to bring the neck up, so we are sort of counterbalancing the head and neck slightly there. And we're also going to begin turning it so it's pointing in the direction where he's aiming travel. We see that consequently this is perhaps a little bit over rotated, so we can pull that frame back slightly. Then I'm going to come out 8 frames here. I might need another in between, but for the minute I'm just looking to get some smoothness going on. I'm just going to reset both of those values at this point, so we can start from a 0, as it were. Let's figure out where I'm going to want his head and neck to be at that point. Well, perhaps I don't want the 8 frames. Perhaps it would be better down here on the down to have that frame, so actually 1 frame before where we are now. And what we'll do is we'll get the neck pitched up just a little like that, and of course get the head pitched up so he's now, you know, pointing directly forwards. And since he's come around this corner there, I think that's good on the side to side. Then we should be breaking to the 8 frame cycle at this point. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, sorry, 7 to get to the next passing position, just as he's ramping up his speed there. I'm going to give another keyframe here. And we see that we need to change the twist, because of course the twist on the body and the spine is altered at this point. And let's swing him a little bit that way, and the head a little bit this way. And there he is, nice and level. You see, we've sort of got this cheetah-like pose in him now as he's going into his run through his spine, head and neck, or sort of reminiscent of a cheetah run perhaps. Let's run along to the next passing position, which is here now, 8 frames later. Sure, those are nice and twisted off there. And we are twisted slightly over to that side. So let's just bring it back much more straight like this. Of course, making sure that he is looking directly forwards down his line of travel. And then we'll go another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is again him at passing position there. And this time the neck would be ever so slightly that way. Head, of course, somewhat back. Also keep it nice and level. So let's see how that generally looks. We'll want some tweens in there. But what we should see there, the main run sequence there is looking good. Obviously it's not tweened at all at the minute, so we're getting all the bounce from the body. The turn round is looking good from this angle. Let's look at it from the top. Yep, not bad. It's slightly over at one point. That's okay, that just needs a tween. See it from there, the pull and whip under is pretty good as well, but to emphasize that, it might be good to pull it up higher. So he whips under here, and then I think can come up to a high over here. So let's bring that neck up there, pitch the head down in compensation. We'll also need it to come up here. There we go, that's better. If anything, we'll keep it even higher still at this point. So there we see this very definite whip and up. So of course he's leading with his head, his body's, you know, coming up and everything as well. So his head's pulling up along with, he's using his entire spinal column to, you know, force himself into the action there. Let's just see it going from over here. Pretty good. It's quite snappy, it is quite quick, but then it would be, of course. So let's check out the tweens on this turn, and it's really here that he's over rotated on heading, and the heading of the neck back some there. And there we go, that's better, that's smoother in. But as we get to this key here, it's going into that over rotation. So what we really want is to sync this head and neck maneuver again with the, you know, timing of the rest of the body. So let's push it back 1. That smooths it out, just that one little frame there keeps it more in sync with what's going on elsewhere in the body. Let's have a look from perspective here. Yeah, round, that's looking pretty nice. See it from another angle. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. We're getting a good timing and sync there. Perhaps by this point he's starting to level his head off. Just give that a little twist there. That sort of helps sell it a little bit more. And we've got 7 frames here, so let's do a 1, 2, 3 and give him a little dip down his neck here. And of course, counter pitch the head. Let's see if that's too strong. What we should really sort of aim for here is for him to be trying almost to keep his head at a level. Almost keeping his head completely level in space. Almost, not quite. Just tip that up in pitch there. Yeah, and the difficulty comes from the fact that we're out of sync with the spine, which has its key there at 597. So let's grab you, and let's shift both of those frames across 1. And there we can see that smooths out that motion. So he whips up his head, and whilst his body bobs underneath him, his head and neck stay pretty much level. So again, sinking that in with the spine action there. This is maybe now a little fast. Oh, maybe not actually, maybe that works. So then we just need to tween this whole section here. So we'll come up to there, which is pretty much the high. You can see there's not a huge amount of difference in the head and neck, carriage at that point. So here we'll take the neck, bring it down, counter turn the head up, and there we see that we get this bounce over in the head and neck like that. Once again, if we look at it from this side, we see that some snap, so I think we're slightly out of sync there. Let's try moving these both by one frame. Yeah, I'll keep the neck, or the head, sorry, just down a little there to keep it level. What we really need is a tween here. There we go, over here. And now we're pretty much into the halfway point, so we're on the 8 frame sequence now. So 4 frames, get the neck down, get the head up, and there we go. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can get the neck down and get the head up. So let's just see how that plays. Pretty good. I view it here from the top, that's pretty good. You can see it from this side over here. Yeah, also looks quite nice. And there from perspective view, it's also pretty good and quite nice and smooth. Obviously we can pick over it, make little tweaks and adjustments if we find any that need doing, but largely and broadly that really is our movement there as we really want and of course need it to be. The remaining part for this move then is the tail. So another little quick bit of fast forward here. You can see that I've worked the tail in there. And again, if we look from view 2 from the top here, we see of course that what the tail is really doing is just again turning into that curve like this. We see that he flicks his tail over initially to counteract what his head and neck spine there is doing, so he gets this little S bend. Again, that's just a balancing thing. You could perhaps have him whip it to the other side to give him some additional momentum as he spins round like this. That would be, one perfectly fine choice, and it's worth having a go to see how it looks. But often for a move like this, you would do what I've done here and just, of course, roll it in with the path of the body like that. And then you'll notice, of course, that as he comes out of the turn, we get a little overshoot, so we get a little wag in there. And then that wag just, starts to decrease and fall off as we get out into the main run like this. And again, if we look at the side view here as we break into the run, you'll see that again I've done this little double cycle up and down movement to the tail there. As well as, of course, as he breaks like this, we whip the tail down there. So he is using that as a counterbalance to the motion of his body like that. So whipping the tail down and pushing the hip up gives him an extra little flip to break out like that. And we see that the tail rolls round and under. Let's see it from the reverse as it will be a bit clearer there. There we go, we see the flick of the tail doing a little bounce and around, under, and whoop, off he goes into his run. So here, again, nothing particularly special, nothing we haven't really already worked on and seen. And of course we see that the tail there maintains this very stiff, rigid sort of shaping to it as it flicks from side to side there whilst he is running away. The other part, of course, that we didn't yet touch on, that we just left, if you'll recall, was of course, his turn away and step back like this. And again, I've just gone through and done our tweening there as a bit of a fast forward. As we can see, there's once again nothing particularly special that we haven't already done before. We've got his foot action going on there to, of course, lift and contact the toes, and we're working the knees and so on. And of course, if we play this backwards, then we get this idea of him creeping forwards, and it's ever so slightly different to the normal forwards walk, but it's starting to get more symmetrical with that as he picks up the speed there, as it were. So again, this is a good place where we see playing the movement forwards and backwards can help us to diagnose how good our movement is really looking there. So you see he starts to just sort of tippy toe along and then move. And of course that is the reverse of him moving backwards and then just, you know, pattering his feet down to a standstill. And you can see again what we've done on the spine, head and neck here, and I'll just go forwards through it to make it more clear. You see that as he comes along here, we've got the little bounce, and you see the undulation there. We have this fine little wave motion that we work through his spine, head and neck, like that. And you can also notice I've worked in this little double bounce there at the end as he comes to rest, because he's sort of, you know, at that crucial moment of decision. What's he going to do? Is he going to break left, break right? Is he going to try and fight? You know, he's sort of just dicing up his options in this last moment there. And so you see that little sort of hesitation, anticipation thing going on in the head and neck. Gives it just that little extra bit of life, like that. And so, of course, we see the whole thing running through there. He's like, right, no, I'm out of here. And off he goes. And so, of course, we can see this entire section playing there where he feeds, backs up, and decides he's off and makes a break for it. Again, always good. Watch a thing from the top. We've got this, you know, very lithe, almost lizard-like character, of course. So this is always a good, you know, angle to view our work from, because, of course, we've got a very long body, and so we can see it all happening there. We'll just whiz round, watch him from other angles to make sure that we are, you know, pretty happy with our work. So there we go, pretty good. Once again, of course, you know, we've done an awful lot of work to get to this stage here, so it's probably high time that we took another little break, and then we'll come back in the next video to really putting on all of the finalising and polish to our whole animation.